Cosplaying is cool, unless your cosplaying is poor, and oh boy did I find the ultimate experience in the upper crust taking a poverty safari. It's not nickel and dimed, it's not Undercover Boss, it's not that time your dad reminded you that he used to work at McDonald's, so he's totally justified in giving the kid behind the register a talking to. No, I read Mauled, My Unintentional Career in Retail by Caitlin Kelley, who thinks she's in the same league as Barbara Ehrenreich. This woman is so out of touch that her brief stint in retail turns into an uproarious comedy. Imagine a snooty debutante clumsily folding a shirt, Mr. Bean style, for 200 pages. That's the book, and I'll be going over the ups and downs with you today, because if journalists can cosplay as wages, I could cosplay as a booktube reviewer. Big warning for spoilers, big warning for a parade of entitlement and prejudice from Caitlin. This lady has a lot of boomer tier racism and sexism, and big warning if you've ever been left out of the group work chat, this might hit a sore spot. I'm gonna clown on her for being unaware and out of touch with her coworkers, so I don't want anyone to feel like, oh no, is this me? Caitlin's book is the pinnacle of nuclear-grade entitlement. I promise, no matter who you are not as bad as Caitlin. And my last warning, this book didn't need to be read in the first place, because the internet has been a great equalizer. The struggles of the working class are no longer a mystery. We don't have to wait for a book deal, anyone can turn on their phone and share why their dead-end job sucks. Just like how anyone can enjoy Magic Mind. Magic Mind is my secret weapon for avoiding burnout, staying focused, and getting a great night's sleep. If you're looking for a quick jolt to power you through to the end of your shift, you are thinking too small. I used to be hardcore addicted to energy drinks. I knew I needed to cool it, and Magic Mind helped build me up for a better long term. They've been a big help for getting my sleep schedule back on track. I've tried it all. Magic Mind is the one that worked for me. I take the focus shot in the AM so I'm locked in with a focused, calm energy, and at night I take the sleep shot to ease me into a pleasant drowsiness. It's the new year, so let's make 2025 the year we start investing in ourselves. We're going to eat right, we're going to hit the gym, and we're going to have Magic Mind to help get us rolling and stay on track. For the first time, they're offering the 24-hour pack, Magic Mind Focus and Magic Mind Sleep. You can get 45% off the bundle using my referral link at magicmind.com/taperjan. That's TAPIRJAN. Link is going to be in the description and pinned comment. Thank you, Magic Mind, for sponsoring this video. You guys rock. And now, on to the review. I'll organize this review by my top 10 funniest moments in this book, because the actual plot can be broadly summarized as, the lady goes to work and she's pretty cheesed off. And before we really dive in, the most important bit of context is that this woman is emotionally dishonest. I'm not saying she's a liar, and I'm being very careful with my words since this is a journalist with a fragile ego, but Caitlin cannot be honest with herself. So for example, she says things like, I hate snobs, and talks about how she detests authority, but there's nothing particularly anti-authoritarian about how she acts or lives her life. She just says she hates authority because she can't chill out and play ball for 10 minutes. Or there's a chapter titled, Deck the Halls, Not the Customers, and it goes over some of the gnarlier scenes from working the holiday season. And we can all agree that is the worst time to be behind a cash register, but the next chapter she's strutting around like, actually, she'd enjoyed the holiday season. The overall tone is very sour grapes and lacks any personal introspection, so the reader is bombarded with emotionally incongruent information. Which leads me to the number 10 funniest moment. Does she want to work? There is so much hemming and hawing over whether or not Caitlin wants this job. I'd like to temporarily steer this review back to nickel and dimed, since that's what Mauled wants to be. And if you're lucky enough that you avoided this required school reading, Nickel and Dimed recounts journalist Barbara Ehrenreich's experience working minimum wage jobs. To her credit, by immersing herself in this lifestyle, even briefly, enriched her insights and gave her that unique perspective. Most academics wouldn't last 5 minutes behind the register, but Barbara was cosplaying as poor. At any point, she could give up the fun and games and return to her cushy life, which is why I'm lukewarm on Nickel and Dimed. She gives herself the stipulation that she'll always have her car and a little just-in-case money, and if she ever goes hungry or homeless, she considers the experiment failed, and she gets to go home. So she's not fully committing to the bit. Going into this experiment with this safety net and exit strategy means she is not going to understand this life, but Barbara states loud and clear from the intro. This is a social experiment. This does not reflect the actual lived realities of the working class. So the point of her book was to highlight the cycle of poverty. So from that angle, mission accomplished. This book got a wider conversation started and opened a lot of people's eyes. Nickel and Dimed is better treated as a historical artifact that got a conversation started, rather than holding it up as the pinnacle of lived experience memoirs on enduring the cycle of poverty. And although I thought Barbara Ehrenreich's rules she laid out for herself were flatly baloney, she does get them out of the way immediately. Meanwhile, by chapter 3 of Mauled, our stunning protagonist is still asking, could it really hurt me to sell t-shirts for a while? Well, I don't know, Caitlin. Could it? Do you want to be here or not? See, chapter 1 starts with her saying it was time for a change and she needed to spread her wings from journalism. She goes over why journalism can be a rough gig, money was tight lately, and she was feeling pretty crummy working alone in her apartment. All very real, tangible downsides to journalism, and if times are tough, no one would fault you for wanting to pick up a side gig. So she goes on and on about all the jobs she didn't want to do, like pump gas or telemarketer, and then she fires into an anecdote about how she was fired from the New York Daily News. Wait, what income bracket is she in where she thinks of like pumping gas as a job? I know there's some states where you legally can't pump your own gas, but she's living in New York. I just keep realizing how out of touch she is. Sorry. Anyway, back to the script. So she fires into an anecdote about how she was fired from the New York Daily News, which was totally unjustified since she was really good at her job. And several of her coworkers were, quote, shocked and sad that she was fired. I'm getting big-time vibes that she was the biggest pain in the keister at the office, but she'd insist the entire place would crumble to the ground without her. So I'm already thinking, okay, why do you have to go over how you felt so lonely in your apartment? Just say you were fired and wanted to mix it up. But she arrives at the stunning conclusion that retail is for me. This is something I want to do. And drops the fun tidbit that she'd only be working there 2 days a week. Bro, how are you making such a big deal out of this? Enough to write a full-length book if you were only popping in twice a week. As goofy and flawed as Nickel and Dimed was, at least she was totally immersed in the experience. And Caitlin wasn't even working the weekend shift. She was working the mid-shift Tuesdays and Wednesdays, which, by the way, she drops down to 1 day a week by the end of the book because she couldn't hack it. And Caitlin is doing this for the money, but I'm not sensing she was willing to let go of any of the finer things to make ends meet. She does mention that she had to drop her therapist when he got too expensive, but that's about the only financial sacrifice she mentions. Okay, there's a part in the book where she tears her shoulder and she's all, I shouldn't have to load these heavy boxes, my shoulder hurts. And in any other scenario, I'd be on the side of the hurt employee. Those boxes can wait, do not ruin your body for a retail gig. But she ruined her shoulder in her weekly jazz dance class. Like, I'm supposed to be on your side here? I'm supposed to go, oh, poor Caitlin, working to make ends meet so you could go to your jazz dance class. Screw you, man. I'm going full bootlicker here and giving you the heaviest box. Alright, so joke number 9. She needs to remind you that she is an accomplished journalist, featuring her massively bruised ego. So Caitlin keeps reminding you she's a journalist, but I'm getting this crazy hunch that she might not have been very good at her job. I recently read The Lead by Calvin Trillin, and that was such a fun look into the crazy world of journalism. Not only does Trillin have such an atmospheric, engaging way of pulling in the reader, that book is loaded with tons of interesting stories about the world of journalism. One of the more interesting tidbits was when he shared about another journalist, and I'm very sorry I cannot remember her name, how she would interview the families of accused suspects or victims. She would call up the family's home phone, says she was from the press, and ask if they're interested in answering a few questions. The typical response from a grieving widow is going, "Screw you, vulture," and slamming on the landline to hang up. Now, what this journalist would do, she would wait 10 minutes and call again. Usually the grieving widow would react with something along the lines of, "Hey, I'm sorry, I'm going through a rough time. Sure, I'll talk with you." Either the widow would have a moment to reflect, or someone else in the house would convince them that they should talk to the press. But if the journalist got a second helping of being told to buzz off, she would completely drop it and she wouldn't try to interview them again. It was such an interesting balance of showing how and when a journalist should push forward. It's a field where you're dealing with a lot of people going through a lot of big emotions. And if you're just being a parasite, you're gonna have a harder time getting strangers to open up to you. I'm bringing this up because Caitlin describes herself with the most unflattering terms for a journalist to the point where I feel like she is incompatible with this line of work. But first, let's hear why journalism is her calling to begin with. She says in chapter 1, "I'd been a journalist since my freshman year of college. It was all I'd ever wanted to be. And I'd gone on to work as a staff reporter and feature writer for 3 major dailies. I never had kids and never wanted them. My dream was to become a foreign correspondent, filing features from Abidjan or Lima. My work had always given me more than a paycheck, offering adventures I could have never otherwise enjoyed, like flying through the middle of an iceberg on my way home from reporting a story in an Arctic village for the Montreal Gazette." Oh my fucking god. Oh, the fucking motor mouth on this chick. A French truck driver 10 years my senior took me on an 8-day journey from Perpignan to Istanbul. At 23, I performed as an extra in the ballet Sleeping Beauty at Lincoln Center. I sipped a gin and tonic aboard the Royal Yacht Britannica, where I met Queen Elizabeth. In other words, it's all about me, 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 me. It's all about me. Look at all the cool adventures my job lets me go on. Writing, investigating, bringing a voice to the powerless. Oh, who cares about all that when she gets to do ballet and meet the queen? Okay, I've known coworkers who've previously worked as an ESL teacher and worked as a flight attendant because their jobs with spectacular travel opportunities. I'm not trying to dismiss that as a workplace perk. If you can get a job that pays for your flight, you should take it. But in those cases, those jobs weren't so intrinsically linked to their identity that they were acting so bewildered at how they ended up in retail. The general vibe was, yeah, it was fun, but I was getting homesick. It's really rubbing me the wrong way that Caitlin tells us that journalism is all she'd ever wanted to be. Don't say that. You are not interested in journalism. You want to go on big, crazy adventures and be the center of attention, which is fine. I just want you to say how you really feel. And for whatever reason, she thinks her wanderlust makes her not like other journalists. She says as much here. I had a chance to speak privately with Paul, the store's assistant manager. He'd once danced professionally in a major American ballet company. As we shared our pre-retail histories, we discovered this unlikely commonality. I had studied ballet for years. We compared our favorite choreographers, and then it turned out I learned he'd also lived and worked, as I had, in France. There, he had worked as a chef, and before he had led a group of soldiers in the French Foreign Legion. Workaholic journalists, most scared to even leave their desk for lunch for fear of losing their hard-to-win jobs, never had such cool stories. I wonder what other surprises lurk beneath the exterior of my new colleagues. Caitlin, I promise, your old journalism coworkers had cool stories. That's the whole point of journalism, dude. Like, they just didn't want to tell them to you. It's also hilarious how she muses on the delightful surprises that her coworkers could be hiding. But more on that in joke number 4. Anyway, now that we've learned why journalism is Caitlin's calling, I want to dig into the grievances that Caitlin had with journalism. She said, but every Tuesday night, putting on my red and white plastic badge and stepping onto that sales floor offered me a paid tutorial in human nature. Theirs and mine. I had never realized quite so clearly why I had enjoyed journalism. Which is crazy because that was your job. I liked writing and exploring new subjects. I loved telling stories. But I really enjoyed meeting and talking with a wide array of people. About yourself, obviously. Working retail reinforced this for me with a new clarity because it primarily demands for it. Oh my God. She has such a freaking roundabout way of talking. Like, how the fuck were you a journalist for so long? Okay. Working retail reinforced this for me with a new clarity because its primary demands forced me to focus on others' needs, not just listening to them. Holy freaking run-on sentence, man. I'm going to ask Rock for a rewrite for clarity on that line because I can barely get it out. All right, Grok says, working in retail had reinforced this lesson for me with newfound clarity because the job primarily requires me to focus on the needs of others, rather than just listening to them to understand or respond to their ideas or opinions on various issues. Anyway, she says, I had never before stepped away from journalism, so had never had a chance to miss it or acquire new skills unrelated to that field. Now, I also saw that some of the skills I'd spent 30 years perfecting might translate to other forms of paid work. Rewarded only for those behaviors that suited my journalism bosses, get in first, get the quote fast, get out, I'd become lopsided and out of balance, like a dancer working on only one side of her body, or a lifter strengthening only his legs. What lifter only does his legs? There's way more guys who only do arm day. I had focused for decades since college, primarily on my intellectual abilities, the ones on which I had always prided myself. This new job demanded a more sophisticated emotional intelligence, finally and belatedly forcing me up to my game in relating well to others, not simply taking notes and fleeing back to a newsroom full of cynics. I think you were the only cynical one there, dude. Journalism rewards behavior that in most other fields are derided as antisocial and obnoxious. Do whatever it takes to get a story first, then crow loudly so everyone can admire you and your employer. Bang on private doors and stick cameras in people's faces and shrink, how do you feel? At grieving relatives. Side note, that's why I started the section with that anecdote from the lead. I wanted to show this is how a journalist with empathy and compassion for the public handles emotionally difficult situations. There is very little shrieking or invasive antisocial behavior, and in those cases where she was turned down, she shrugged it off and kept working. I guess Caitlin doesn't see that as an option. But anyway, she continues. To succeed as a journalist meant leashing your kinder, gentler qualities, if you had any, freeing them only when useful for nailing an interview or source. Much as I love the intellectual challenges of journalism, I rarely liked or socialized with colleagues. I too often found cold, hard, shellfish, and ruthlessly ambitious. Being surrounded by people behaving badly brought out the worst in my own highly competitive character. I wondered when, where, or if my better qualities, my playful humor, my compassion, and my joy in sincerely connecting with others would ever find expression within a job. Here, in retail, finally, they had. On the sales floor, I encountered dozens of strangers every week, from surgeons to jet pilots. Can you quit with the humble bragging for like 3 seconds? She acts so damn surprised that customers are people too, and she's sharing her enlightened experience, opening her ears and her heart. The way she's framing these basic human interactions and how they're all for her benefit, her personal growth, it made me so sick I had to laugh. A few pages later, she drops that she's actually really bad at small talk. Oh, Caitlin, you are so brave for opening up about how you're terrible at small talk. Now, this is the closest to emotional honesty we get in this book. It's when Caitlin shares her status anxiety. This excerpt starts during the employee training session, and the North Face is paying for everyone's dinner. She says, 2 associates, giggling like naughty schoolchildren at their audacious selection, each ordered $28 sirloin. Yeah, sorry they're having a little bit of fun. It's their damn right to order the steak. Why do you have to frame it as giggling like naughty schoolchildren? When else can we eat like this? They asked the rest of us, daring us to do the same. Instead, most of us ordered modestly, a burger or a salad. On our combined income from journalism, steak was not much of a luxury for Jose and me. We ate it a few times a month. And yet, compared to my middle-aged friends and neighbors, most of whom had high 6-figure combined incomes, I often felt like a loser. Homie, if your neighbors are making you feel like a loser, isn't that a good thing? Isn't that a sign of upward mobility or whatever? Look, if getting new friends isn't an option, either act like you belong or ham up your trashiness and get used to stuffing your jacket pocket with shrimp cocktail. Are you still writing? They'd ask me brightly, as though my life's profession were a hobby, something I do to fill the time and earn a little play money. Okay, I'm curious, what's the closest anyone actually said to that? Or if this is something you're sniffing out because their tone was a little dismissive. These fellow suburbanites, the wealthiest certainly, owned multiple homes, vacationed lavishly, and groomed their kids attending private schools for the Ivy League. They drove new Lexuses and Mercedes and BMWs. Their blonde wives happily stayed at home to manage their kids' enormous mansions. They had no idea what to make of me. Well, yeah, because you're projecting so much onto them. Okay, I feel you there. I'm uncomfortable as heck if I'm around the upper crust and I'm not blending into the background for work. But dude, these are your neighbors. Make a little effort. I don't want to white knight a bunch of strangers in a way higher tax bracket, but dude, put in the work. I promise they are not just a bunch of Stepford wives. Now, sitting at this hotel dinner table, surrounded by my new colleagues whose choices and experiences had been so different from mine, their tattoos and piercings, their hollow gold door knocker earrings, hoodies, and skin-tight clothes, I wondered where, if anywhere, I belonged. I was beginning to appreciate the cocoon I'd been living in until then. In our co-op building, everyone owned their home. I attended a church whose parishioners were wealthy lawyers, network TV anchors, and producers, Wall Street money guys. The people I knew socially and professionally drove late model cars and vacationed overseas. My new coworkers lived in low-income neighborhoods far away from the mall, like Washington Heights, at the north end of Manhattan, or the Bronx, just slightly farther south than we were, who would be commuting an hour or more. Oh my, I don't live in New York. I don't care about this. I turned to Dave, a poised, good-looking 18-year-old college student, who had told me he was on a basketball scholarship and wrote poetry. Our conversation flowed easily. He was smooth, polished, charming. We both loved Sandra Cisneros, and I offered to lend him a book of poems by my favorite, Yeats, someone he had never heard of. Okay, it's like you almost had a human connection with someone, and you had to polish it off by gloating about how he had never heard of Yeats. You can't just give him the book and be cool. Anyway, onward to joke number 8. She's bewildered at being the only white person in the room, being around tattooed individuals, shocked that her coworkers might have a criminal record, but it doesn't bother her. She swears she's cool. So after Caitlin wildly oscillates between why retail is for me and quietly slipping in that she was fired, the story begrudgingly arrives at her job interview for the North Face, where she shares, I had never met, let alone needed to impress, someone so inked, and the pearl clutching escalates from there. Once training begins at chapter 2, she says, I was the only Caucasian in the room. What? How? Okay, I don't want to shame you if you're white and the first time you were the quote-unquote minority was a pivotal moment for you. If anything, it's good that you're leaving your bubble. I'll keep the power leveling to a minimum, but my default state has always been valiantly fulfilling the role of token white guy. With that out of the way, how in the dink is this lady a journalist, and she felt so darn bewildered at being the only Caucasian in a room? How can you brag about going around the world and interviewing everyone, but stepping into a North Face employee training session is the first time you're the minority? North Face is ritzier than most retail gigs. How are you so bewildered by everything happening? Once Caitlin is hired, trained, and emotionally recovered from getting a box without a label, she learns that some of her coworkers might have broken the law. She says, I didn't know how to feel about working with colleagues who may have broken the law. At first, it freaked me out. I don't even know what distinguishes a felony from a misdemeanor. Aren't you a journalist? How do you not know this? Were these coworkers thieves? Violent? Had they committed assault? Stolen a car? Sold drugs? It's not a question you can ask someone in casual conversation. Again, wait, aren't you a journalist? How is this off limits? Even in private, I never did ask, and I never found out. Man, I wonder why you got fired from your journalism gig. You can't find anything out. But she doesn't care. She totally doesn't care. A page later, she tells us, I heard persistent rumors about several of our employees using drugs, smoking pot on the job. I didn't care. I hate infighting, so whenever someone told me this, and I would hear it repeatedly over the years I worked there, you worked 2 years. I shrugged and shut the gossiper down. I don't do drugs and cared only that our team was hardworking and friendly. My life had been full of unwanted drama at the Daily News. The whole point of this job was to escape that. End quote. This chapter, she reiterates that this was her first time working with someone with tattoos. This was the first time she worked with veterans, and she finally unloads more of her overt prejudices. She says, journalists, often too broke or tired to do much in their leisure hours, now look pretty boring in comparison. The Black and Hispanic journalists I knew who'd managed to claw their way into well-paying or prestigious journalism jobs were, by necessity if not by their nature, safely corporate and deracinated, soft-spoken and polite in Silk and Linen and Brooks Brothers. Oh my God. She is so close to saying one of the good ones. I hate it so much. My new coworkers wore do-rags and had multiple tattoos and piercings and long, wildly decorated nails. One young woman, Andrea, had a mini constellation circling the nape of her neck, and it took me a reread, but I realized she's describing Andrea's tattoos here, not a necklace. Anyway, she says, I admired Andrea's confidence. I liked being around people tattooed and pierced. No, you obviously do not. Happy to simply be themselves. Now, maybe I could be as well. To win respect or acceptance in the store, under the hot spotlights and security cameras' gaze, I didn't have to make front page or have a new book coming out from a major publisher or dive thousands of visitors to my blog. I just had to show up, work well, get along with everyone, and go home. But would the staff of our store even like one another? Would we share jokes? What would we talk about? So much for you feeling so comfortable around the ink. Oh my God, this lady cannot go 2 pages without contradicting herself. Who would be the laziest or the most hardworking? Who, if anyone, would be fired or promoted? I thought you were here to clock in and clock out. Why are you making it into a competition? Didn't you just say you were done with the cutthroat world of journalism? And you're already side-eyeing your employees and thinking through who's going to be the victor of your imaginary Squid Game? For the love of it, can you please read through what you just wrote? So joke number 7. How are you so racist? So other than feeling bewildered by being the only white person in the room, Caitlin makes a few digs about her coworkers wearing hoop earrings and do-rags and gets oddly judgmental about them having children they can't handle. Now, she never overtly connects these things to racial identity. So it's one of those instances where, thanks to her sheltered life, she's clearly uncomfortable by these cultural differences, but she has enough sense to not overtly say anything too old school racist. She makes a big point about feeling out of place with her coworkers because they're from a lower tax bracket, and that's the crux of why she feels so distant from all of her coworkers. Whenever race is brought up, it's to highlight her own. She's the outsider because she's Caucasian. However, I like the part of my brain that recognizes tact, so I can just go ahead and say, this lady is more racist than me. Anyone who makes this big of a stink over being the only white person is waving an enormous red flag. Now, I put this at joke number 7 because I kept jotting down the note, Caitlin, can you please just say a slur and get it over with? And I was practicing an ancient ritual for my culture, the get a load of this guy cam. However, if you've ever had a doofy boomer ask you, where are your parents from? These parts of the book are more likely to piss you off. Which leads me to joke number 6. She's sexist too. Holy internalized misogyny, her sexism is so bad. With the racial stuff, she at least had the sense to keep like 10% of it to herself and let the audience fill in the blanks. No, here she overtly says how women are a pain. And side note, this book was written before the Karen meme took off. And I've always saw the Karen meme as a bit of a psyop. There's a good reason why it resonated with so many people, because yes, there are difficult customers, and yeah, women do most of the shopping, so you're more likely to run into difficult customers who are women. But the way this meme exploded feels weird. It's like we're being shamed into being afraid to ask for a refund, and I hate it. And there's ways to discuss gender dynamics in retail space and the unique ways women will abuse power. And Caitlin gives us the worst possible take. She tells us in chapter 4, quote, the worst moment that first holiday season was a combination of my inexperience and a nasty customer. I had been helping a woman and her teenage son, who was clearly mentally disabled and grouchy. Neither easy to please nor to fit. She was weary, and I patiently helped them both. We headed to the cash wrap, where a long line of customers already stood waiting. I went to ring up my customer and complete the sale, and stood her in front of a scrawny blonde. Again with the scrawny blonde digs. Why are you... Who bullied you in high school who was a skinny blonde girl? It didn't seem right to push my customer to the back, so to complete the sale graciously and smoothly, I stood her at the front of the line. The results were as shocking and loud as if I'd punched the blonde in the face. What do you think you're doing? She shrieked, as much at me as at my shocked customer and her son. I'm in line here. Who do you think you are, cutting in like that? My poor client shriveled, confused and scared. Everyone in line behind them looked miserable, and I knew they were all watching me to see how I would handle it. Would I snap back, walk away, burst into tears, go get a manager? None of the above. It was actually my fault, but I wasn't about to admit it, or my newness to retail. I asked my customer and her son to stand out of the way on one side of the cash wrap behind me as the harpy shouted and cursed me and threatened to call corporate. I got my customer out, trying simultaneously to make Miss Nuts lower her voice, ring up the sales accurately, and apologize profusely to my poor shopper and her son. The blonde just wouldn't shut up. It was as though someone had pressed a screaming button. I rang her up, shaking, desperately wanting to shriek back at her. I was frustrated with myself and my managers for allowing the situation to escalate and make my customer, and me, the brunt of such undeserved rage, plus the humiliation of being treated like crap in front of a dozen strangers. The next customer, a young woman, stepped forward, whispering sympathetically, "What a witch!" Men were always nicer, maybe because they enjoyed more money, power, status, or time. Maybe it was just some sort of girl thing. All of those skinny blondes with ropey arms and size 2 hips and $18,000 wafer-thin gold Cartier watches. Those women were the ones who felt compelled to remind us all that they had whatever it took to snag a wealthy man/job/life, while we, poor, suitable fools in ugly shoes, nylon uniforms, a dead-end job, plastic-tagged lanyards, clearly did not. Maybe these women were nastier to us because they were so accustomed to bossing around an entire army of docile, grateful, low-status women, their cooks, nannies, trainers, au pairs, manicurists, babysitters, that they simply mistook us for yet more of their attentive flock. No matter how rude the men, and if you were pretty horrid, the women were always worse. End quote. So she goes on to tell some stories about how absolutely terrible the ladies were. The closest to egalitarianism is when she shares the astute observation. The holidays brought out the bitch in everyone, regardless of gender. Oh, Caitlin, you sound like the crying pink soy jack every time you talk about women in a better spot than you, which is why this gets my number 6 spot for funniest joke in the book. Joke number 5. Crying because this isn't Costco. Why is this not Costco? I am fully prepared to have the comment section call me a bootlicker, but Caitlin keeps bringing up how other retailers treat their employees better. And whenever this topic comes up, I'm never thinking, screw those capitalist pigs, we gotta unionize. Instead, all I can hear from Caitlin is, but my friends all have a 10 p.m. curfew. God, it's so unfair that I have to be home at 8. She brings up that Home Depot gives their employees PDAs to check the stockroom, and there's a good deal of huffing over, why can't her store be cool and give the employees PDAs too? Don't they know how much easier it would be if they had PDAs like the Home Depot? And it's like, Caitlin, you're right, but your store is functional without them. They've proven they could turn a profit without equipping you with any tech. There's also a lot of praise for Costco like it's the promised land of retail, where they treat employees like royalty. Every time she brings it up, I find myself defending the very system I loathe because the way she's thinking about it feels stupid. Her thinking can be mostly summed up as this. Well, if stores make their employees happy, the store is better, the customers are happier, profits are higher. Gosh, why aren't they doing this? It just makes sense. And suddenly I can feel the disease that is capitalism taking over my body. I'm turning into an armchair economist and saying, sorry, Caitlin, but stores can still make a profit even when they pay their employees peanuts. That's why they treat you like crap. That's why not every store is Costco. So I put this at joke number 5 since the joke was on me. All it took was someone getting a little too whiny for me to betray my core values. Womp womp. Joke number 4. No one wants to go to your private pool. Whoo boy. Here was the greatest evidence that Caitlin was left out of the work group chat, but let me read you to this as is. Proud, ambitious, and educated, Tam found these low expectations horrifying. It sometimes felt like she looked to me, a woman almost twice her age, who had some decent jobs along the way. No, you had one and you were bad at it. For moral support. And I'm glad you specified that it felt like she looked to you for advice, because there is no way anyone could ever actually pull you aside and say, Caitlin, I need you for moral support. I need to hear some input from someone twice my age who's had some decent jobs along the way. Anyway, she says, I was 100% behind her on this one and told her so, plainly. Another child without a second income would only postpone her ability to flee the ghetto of retail, and we both knew it. Determination to better her situation, professionally and personally, was Tam's fuel source to get out of debt, which she did, to get her own apartment, which she did, and once she got it, to make sure it was exactly to her liking, down to the color and style and size of her window blinds. I had been to Paris while working at the store, a 50th birthday gift from my then fiancé, Jose, and I had created a small book of images I'd shot there in color, black and white, and sepia. I wanted to give Tam a housewarming gift and asked if she'd like one of the photos. There is so much wrong with this. First of all, you can't just give her a nice photo and be like, hey, this looks classy and you're a classy gal. You should take this classy photo and put it on your classy apartment. You got to give her your travel photo book and make her flip through it and pick out the one she likes best. Like, this is a ruse so that everyone can see that you went to France. And why would you assume somebody would want your travel photos? It's incredible. Anyway, she says, she chose an 11 by 14 sepia image of a Batu Mouche boat on the sea at sunset. I would never see it on her wall. Well, yeah, because you suck too much to be invited to hang out after work. But that wasn't the point. I wanted her, as a woman I liked and admired, someone who values elegance and style, to enjoy something beautiful. Tam and I had few unlikely things in common, which we discovered over our years of working the same shift. We had both been badly bullied in high school. She for her dark skin, me for being too outspoken. And those are not the same thing. The audacity for you to compare these is outstanding. You might have been bullied, but you do not know what it is like to be bullied for being black. What's more is, later in the book, she does go over how she was bullied in high school. It's because high school was her first co-ed experience, so she was shy, she didn't know how to act around boys, and she didn't know how to dress, and she no longer had a school uniform. That is a way different experience than her being too outspoken. But she reassures us that when she graduated, she had plenty of friends, a cool boyfriend, and was even named prom queen, so she totally had the last laugh. So she says, our banter was often so sharp-edged people gasped. But we were like two baby tigers swatting on another in play, having learned young how to verbally defend ourselves. You have so many run-on sentences, I seriously doubt this. And we were both working hard to clear a pile of credit card debt. Oh, was Tam also in your weekly jazz dance class? Our friendship, albeit limited to our time in the store, involved plenty of teasing. You know, you ain't wrapped too tight, she'd exclaim on nights I was acting silly to let off steam. I tried to invite several of my coworkers to my home, but it was rebuffed both times. I own an apartment in a simple, 60-year-old red brick building with an outdoor pool. It's a real refuge on a steamy summer day, and I invited several women to come by and enjoy it. They preferred to head to the beach. Oh, a pool, how fancy, said Tam. Her words and sarcastic tone stung. After a few minutes, she quietly added, I don't know how to swim. Neither does Jose, I reassured her. I figured you'd just come by and look decorative if you wanted. But it was clear she had no interest, and I never asked again. On a few occasions, it became clear that I and some of my coworkers experienced life very differently. One afternoon, when Angie was newly pregnant, Joe casually announced that Frank, her boyfriend, had been stabbed. Stabbed? Apparently, he'd gotten into a bar fight, but wasn't seriously injured. So Caitlin goes on and on about how she was the last person at work to find out about how and where everyone in the workplace had been involved in different physical altercations. And she ends the chapter with this. Retail was a rough little world, but to me and some of my coworkers, it offered a clean, well-lit cocoon. And sure, Caitlin, it was a well-lit cocoon. It was safety from the big, scary world, I'm sure. Onward to joke number 3. That time Caitlin had a temper tantrum and destroyed a shepherd's hook. The shepherd's hooks are Caitlin's personal enemy. She wonders why there's only 2, when it just makes sense for the store to have more. She even looks up how much it would cost to get more, and it's like $5, leaving her even more floored and flabbergasted that the North Face only provided her store with 2. The solution here would be to either A, ignore it, or B, just buy another shepherd's hook, don't say anything, just plant it and move on. When there's a workplace annoyance, I typically align with Group A, but I have seen coworkers who've stepped in when there's a creaky door or minor DIY needed, and they took care of it. Were they supposed to do that? Well, probably not. But no one's going to re-squeak the door because they weren't supposed to repair it. So one day, Caitlin got seriously cheesed off that the back room was such a big dang mess, so she took one of the shepherd's hook and she smashed it. She hid the evidence instead of throwing it out, and it's like, dude, you're constantly crying about the shepherd's hooks. You're already suspect number 1 in this crime. Now you're just leaving the fingerprinted body for some manager to discover? Like, come on, man, this is just sloppy. So this was my number 3 biggest laugh because I love a good public freakout. Onward to joke number 2. You work 2 days a week. You are not getting a promotion. Yes, Caitlin thinks she is entitled to a promotion, and she's quick to cry sexism when she's dismissed. Once again, I wish I could agree with her. I've seen plenty of chicks give it their all, and management would rather bring in some doofus from outside the company for a promotion. And that sucks. That's a problem. But Caitlin, you cannot say you being passed over for a promotion has anything to do with sexism in the workplace. You are barely at the store to begin with. Maybe first try to work a 20-hour week before you start up with the promotion talk. What's more is she makes it clear that she only wants a temporary promotion, which is something I had never heard of before, but Caitlin acts like it's a real thing, and the North Face is being so unreasonable for not entertaining this idea. So this easily sits at my number 2 funniest joke of the book. And now, for the funniest joke of Mauled, was Caitlin's author portrait. After I read this book, I had to see what Caitlin was up to lately. I guess freelance editor is her calling. Too bad we didn't get a book about how, actually, going into freelance editing is the best thing that had ever happened to her. To reassure customers that this is a service you can trust, Caitlin shares this photo where she's tilting her head and mean mugging the camera, and I'll be real, I lost my fucking mind over this photo, because this looks like a perfect one-to-one recreation of Whytmanga's PNG tuber avatar. Here I was, snarking up a storm, and I didn't even realize I was dunking on Whytmanga's grandma the whole time. And if you're new around here, Whytmanga is my senpai who I have a parasocial crush on. I've done so many big, stupid stunts to get him to notice me, and yet, crickets. Which is crazy, because they've had no problem sniffing out content with way less traction than mine. And hey, I'm not trying to big league anyone here. I'm not trying to get a big ego because I managed to get lucky with a few videos. I know that having a handful of my content perform okayish does not make me a big cheese. I can't say that enough. but I cannot help but feel like something's a little fishy when they comment on videos with under 1K and I'm left in the dust. I see that my work has been shared in a work chat, probably theirs. I don't know what other workplace would care about my clown behavior, and the cherry on top is that there's a handful of Saturday AM white knights and artists subscribed to my Substack. I will not name names, your secret is safe with me, but I know you're there. I know you know who I am, so I decided to take matters into my own hands. I bought Whytmanga's YouTube membership and I sprung for the $10 tier since that one promises member shoutouts, and shockingly, nothing. I have yet to receive my shoutout. I am paying for Senpai to notice me, but he refuses. He had no problem plugging everyone else, but I get left out? What's more is he's not delivering on the other promised perks, which is kind of a big deal. You can't promise your members the world and give nothing. If you're busy with your day job or art block, just say you need some time off, man. I'm your biggest fan. I have nothing but love and understanding for you. What's even more troubling is Whytmanga has said that most of his money comes from social media, not manga, and it's like, how are you this bad at social media if this is where most of your money is coming from? Is it all love-struck fools like me who will support you no matter what? I don't know how Apple Black is going to get to volume 23 if this is your business strategy, because White isn't a mangaka. He is a social media influencer cosplaying as a mangaka, which is an honorable step up from the way his grandma Caitlin cosplayed as poor for clout. And if I'm going to carry on this tradition, I'll have to innovate and do something different from the previous generations. I'm already using my meager YouTube attention to boost my manga career, so I need to do something different from White. So I think it's about time I cosplay as a Magic Mind salesman. So I'd like to remind everyone, for the first time, Magic Mind is offering a 24-hour pack, Magic Mind Focus and Magic Mind Sleep. You could get 45% off the bundle using my referral link at magicmind.com/taperedjan. That's TAPIRJAN. Link is going to be in the description and pinned comment. Thank you, Magic Mind, for sponsoring this video. You guys rock.